Welcome back to the Scale Up Show. This is your host, Ryan Staley, and I am back with part 2 with Andy Paul, the host of the Win Rate podcast. On top of it, too, he is a 3 best-selling author with a book called Sell Without Selling, also the CEO and founder of Zero Time Selling. Andy and I spoke a lot about what it's like having a 9-year run in podcasting, right? How to get attention at scale. And then we went into human nature. If you did not listen to that episode, please go back to it. He drops some bombs at the end and in the middle as well, so you don't want to just skip to the end. And now today, we're going to talk about a little bit of a different subject. We're going to switch gears, and we're going to talk about, so for those of you who don't know, Andy's done a ton of keynotes over the last few years, also connects with hundreds of thousands of people on social on a daily and weekly basis. But one of the things that I want to talk to him about today, and you and I are going to, is more so about like what's right and what's kind of wrong going on with AI, what you're seeing, how sales teams are adopting it. I would love to just hear your kind of perspective on that. So let's get into that now, man. I mean, 10,000 is a lot of people. First of all, welcome. Happy to have you on the show, man. I forgot since I was giving such a detailed, spirited intro to you. So welcome. Happy to have you on the show, first of all.
And I appreciate that introduction. Only one correction is the book is it's called Sell Without Selling Out.
Oh, I probably said it wrong. I said it wrong.
Yeah, you missed the out part, but Sell Without Selling Out.
Sell without selling out, right?
Yeah. And no, thanks for having me back. I don't want to get sidetracked by that. But
all good, man.
Yeah, AI is a big topic because invariably what we're going to say is probably going to be wrong because who knows what's happening. But yeah, I will say what I've seen so far and is, we're using AI to automate repetitive tasks, and that's a great use of it. I think where the opportunity still exists, and you can sort of see a path for this, but how are we using it to help our buyers make their decisions? Mm-hmm. And that's sort of been the big gap with sales technology in general. I mean, we look over the last 20, 25 years, we've had this, starting with the growth of CRM systems and into various other platforms in the sales world. And our tech stack is this explosion in innovative technologies, but they were all, by and large, geared towards helping the seller pitch their product and sell their product, and not geared towards helping the buyer make their decisions. And I think that left a big gap in the marketplace. And I think what we've seen as a result of that is that in our previous episode, we talked about the sort of overemphasis on process from a seller perspective, is it sort of accentuated that. And, perfect example is just, if anybody has a CRM system, they've got their defined sales stages in the CRM system. Those are kind of a recent invention. I mean,
what's that?
Those are sort of a recent invention. I mean, I'm old enough that, for a good chunk of my career, which predated CRM systems, we had contact management systems and so on. We didn't have sales stages.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't have exit criteria for stages. And somebody could be listening and say, wow, gosh, we're much better off because of it. And I would challenge that and say, well, look at the data. The data doesn't support that. The data supports that perhaps, we become so enamored of the technology and our processes and using technology to do more things, a greater quantity of activities. But when you look at true productivity in sales, arguably you can make the case that actually we've become less good at B2B selling over the last 20, 25 years than we were before.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no need for it because it was more a function of how we were using this technology as opposed to the technology itself. And so this is a long way sort of saying this is the challenge with AI is sure. And there's been academic studies written about this. One that just came out a couple weeks ago, a professor from MIT.
What's it called, by the way? Do you know what it is? You mentioned it before.
Oh gosh, I got a bookmark here somewhere.
We can come back to it. It's okay, man. If you don't know, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I was just curious on what the name of it was.
But let me just.
He's looking it up. He's getting you data in real time. This is.
Let's see if it's
proven Andy is not a robot.
Yeah.
shows you the real life.
I've got bookmarked somewhere. But you can find it. He was a professor from MIT. He's written a lot about the impact on GDP and productivity based of technology, and
Mhm.
similar to like Paul Krugman and other economists. What he's found is that we never live up to the hype in terms of the impact they're going to have in the long run. And he makes the case that it's probably going to be the same, largely the same with AI as it was with past, what we thought, technological revolutions, as we learn to use them and adapt them. And we tend to use them mostly for, automating repetitive tasks, and instead of how can we really integrate these into, more complex problem solving for on a data basis for sellers. That, I think, is the opportunity and the challenge for, I don't say I have an answer for it, but, I've looked at a fair number of tools that people have come to me and wanted to show me. And yeah, they're interesting. They're cool, but they basically are writing personalized emails at scale again, right? Which is, sort of this thing we've been doing for a number of years with, sales engagement platforms and the like. And it's funny, people have all this angst about, outbound is dead, and, buyers are overwhelmed with, it's like, well, who did that? Right? We did that, right? And we took this technology and used it indiscriminately to bombard all of our buyers with undifferentiated messaging. And now we're wondering, how do we solve this problem that we created, though most people don't acknowledge the fact that we created it ourselves. So how do we avoid that with this really interesting technology that offers, possibilities for many cases we can't really begin to conceive what they could be? And I think part of it is that we need to have thoughtful people who are looking at the problem from the right perspective. And unfortunately, most of the tools that are out there trying to attack the easy problem, quote unquote easy, it's actually really hard, is, how do I connect with someone, right? How do I top of funnel focus? How do I use AI to, create that mythical personalized email that's going to capture their attention because we've gone through and scraped all their digital breadcrumbs and in a way that we never be able to do. And we're going to match up, we're going to analyze their LinkedIn profile, and we're going to match it up against a personality profile, and we're going to write the content of the copy of the email based on their position on a personality profile, blah, 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 blah. Oh, it's interesting. But it doesn't really solve the ultimate problem in my mind, which is, everybody's so consumed with, using AI to build pipeline. And in my belief, the issue is not pipeline. When, if, industries like SaaS, where there are 20% win rates on average, the problem is not enough pipeline. I would argue they have too much pipeline. But the problem is they don't know how to win. They just don't know how to win a deal because they don't know how to help the buyer in a way to make decisions in a way that, creates a compelling case for doing business with them. Yeah. So that, I think, is a real opportunity with using AI, is how do we use that? How do you use this technology to help sellers help the buyers to complete this task that the buyer have?
I think that's a good perspective because, I think and this is what I see is and this is not just with AI, this is in general, pipeline is the siren song that's going to cure all, right? For companies, that's what most folks are attracted to. But then if you ask second, third, and fourth level questions, at least when I do to CEOs, it's usually much deeper than that. And what you're talking about, I think, is there's a lot of opportunity there, right? Really optimize what you have, and win rate's huge for that. And so to answer your question, I'll give you an example of how I'm seeing it work specifically with close rates. One of my favorites is so basically, and this is for larger organizations, there's a way to do it for SMB as well. It's a little bit different, but I'll give the larger version is, so step one is basically rapidly condensing the annual report, the letter from the CEO, and then the key risks and and then customizing that for your offering so that when you have a conversation and have that first appointment, it's basically relevant to the company, the industry, and what they're actually going through at the time, so that you're making best use of that buyer's time. So sure. That's one example I see really good. Another, and this is what a lot of folks are lacking too, and I'm sure you probably see this, but one of the things that there's like a senior director of sourcing at Lowe's Home Improvement that we met with, and he's like, Ryan, your team's really good. And this was for a deal that was, I don't know, it was like 1.2 million a month, right? And I'm like, okay,
Mhm.
I should dig deeper on this, because if we're really good for someone at a deal size this that has I think his budget was 60 million in savings he had to hit a year. I'm like, okay, this is something I want to dig into. And I'm like, why is that, man? Like, what's the deal? He goes, well, basically, your team comes in, understands not only the company pressures that I have, basically being a publicly traded company, but then also what's specific to retail and the problems I have in my role related to that outside of what you guys do. And he goes, not
Mhm.
very many companies do that. And I'm like, well, what percentage would you guess of salespeople that come in here? He's like, less than 10%, right? And this is like one of the top 50 biggest companies in the world. So like personally, like there's a prompt you could do and this is what turned me on to AI, is basically that took me up a lot of cycles and hours in front of clients to learn. And once GPT came out, I tested it and got close to there in like 3 questions. And I'm like, okay, this could be something insane. So those are a couple examples that I've seen. I don't know if there's any that you see as well.
Well, no, I think those are good examples in terms of helping sellers develop a point of view about what they're doing with the buyer, right?
Mm-hmm.
Here I think is the big challenge. And I think this is not necessarily a challenge that AI can handle in real time, nor even with AGI necessarily be able to do, is that when you're so locked into sort of, and what you really described are ways that I'm trying to capture the buyer's attention, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is certainly a huge task. I need to be able to capture their attention. I would argue the bigger task is maintaining their attention and retaining it.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And so in order to do that is, again, I need to be able to help them in some dimension. And the whole separate conversation we have about that is help them in some dimension in their own process of making a decision. And they really have two decisions to make, right? Buyers, they have to make a decision whether or not they're going to make a change. And then secondly, who are they make the change with? And what happens is that when we're so focused sort of on our product and our process, is we're not really paying attention to the buyer. And so when you're executing a process, you say, okay, we did this with the buyer, so here's what's next. Well, for me, when I'm coaching sellers and working with sellers, is the big challenge to get them to change that way of thinking, because it's not about what comes next. It's about what comes next based on what happened before. And
Yeah.
this
Point.
is where we have a huge problem, because we have managers and leaders coaching sellers say, you got to execute this process. These are our stages. We have these linear sequential stages you're going to execute. They have these exit criteria. It's like, well, so what? That's not really relevant. The buyer may need something different based on what happened. So what comes next isn't already determined. It's unknown. And it could be completely, at right angles from what you've set up as your process. And that's a human issue to just, because you're in real time, you need to be able to react to that. And the AI is not necessarily going to help you with that. It might prepare you some if you're really open-minded. As you said, if you develop the right set of prompts to say, I'm going to go do some if-then analyses, role-playing, or let's say gaming, if you will, game playing before the call. If they do this, then what? I could do that. If they do this, we could talk about this. And you don't necessarily need AI for that, but I think it's useful to provide you some different perspectives you wouldn't necessarily think about yourself. That's great. But that's what the buyer needs in the moment. They don't need the next step in your process. They need you to be able to respond directly to what they did or said or said they needed or whatever. And this is a challenge. And so, yeah, I'm bullish on AI. It's funny. I was creating a slide presentation last week and using Gemini with me, and Gemini popped up and sort of did the summary of a couple slides I'd created. And I thought, you know what? Wow, that's a much better way to put it than I was thinking about. And, to me, that's cool, right? So you obviously want to use tools like AI to help you generate new perspectives on what you're trying to do. But that's a separate task from how you respond to the triggers and stimulus of the buyer.
Yeah.
And that's the huge gap. And I think that's the thing that we're not going to see real value from AI initially until we sort of solve that. And I'm sure smarter people than I am are thinking about that and working on it. You know, I've sort of some ideas myself, but that's really, if we want to say, look, we've got to stop this habit we're in right now of mindlessly generating pipeline that we win at a small fraction of. I mean, it's wasteful on so many dimensions. It's wasteful for the buyer. It's wasteful for us. I mean, we need to get a better job of saying, look, if we're going to make the decision to actually sell to this person, to actually bring this opportunity into our pipeline, we should win it. It's that simple, right? I mean, if you're a seller, and this is certainly what I did with my sellers, is say, okay, why does that belong in our pipeline? Tell me why we are uniquely suited to win this deal. And if a salesperson can't have a decent answer for that, then opportunity doesn't belong in the pipeline. You need to know upfront, not know, but you need to have an intuitive sense based on experience and so on, and conversation with the buyer, why this is worth putting into our pipeline and consuming our time. And it's not just because they raised their hand and said, yeah, we want to talk to you. That's sort of the low barrier to entry you see so much in so many pipelines. And that's part of why we get these low win rates that then low win rates demand, if you want to grow, they demand a lot of excess pipeline, right? As opposed to, if you're an organization at a 50% average win rate versus a 20% win rate.
Oh yeah, it's night and day. I mean,
the 20% average win rate team, just do the math, has to sell 250% more, has to do 250% more selling, quote unquote selling, sales activities and everything, than that at a 50% win rate.
Yeah.
Why?
I think
it's largely avoidable.
Well, I love your scenario planning analogy, by the way. I think that's awesome. That's like a use case I have not leveraged it for, of like almost like a war room scenario planning. So I think that's an awesome use case for AI. And I think you nailed it too, with like, there's a lot of opportunity right there. Like I experienced that and I'll tell you, this is like a real world painful. I have scars. I'm the grizzled veteran in this case, not you, right? Like I mentioned in podcasting, I'm the grizzled veteran. Right. We had an RFP situation, really large healthcare system, $16 million deal, and it was an 18-month-long sales cycle. If it was probably invested 300-400 hours in it collectively as the team to get it, and we got all the way to the end. Yeah. We beat out 20 of the 21 other participants, but we were the first loser, right? We were second place. And I would have known that we were going to lose that deal if we asked one question, basically halfway through the process, or we could have gotten the deal, I should say, at the same time, right? And the big question we didn't understand was that after they made the decision and went forward, who was the new people or the new person that owned it afterwards? Like we were assuming it was going to be the same people that had the budget then. And we didn't ask that question, and it was shifting to someone else we didn't have exposure to. Our competitor was like tight with them. And that was like the biggest screw up that we had. And so that was one of the things that we learned from the hard experience of that. And so I look at it now as like asking the questions so you can easily disqualify them or find out the gaps before you disqualify them to avoid situations like that.
Yeah. And theoretically, that's possibly something, AI could potentially help with, right? Is if you had a very comprehensive account map, if you knew that group actually existed. If you didn't know, then it wasn't necessarily going to help you. But it could help point out areas where perhaps, have you thought about this? And to me, that's a really beneficial use of the technology is, have you just continually think about the various scenarios that could happen. And again, for me, this is really what distinguishes sort of run-of-the-mill sellers with those that succeed on a more consistent level. They're not more skilled in any one dimension other than being more thoughtful about what potentially could happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thoughtfulness is definitely a superpower. I agree with you on that, man. And I think like one other one that I'm seeing is curiosity as well, right? Thoughtfulness and curiosity are huge with what I'm seeing right now.
Sure. I mean, everybody wants to just, again, I speak in broad terms, not everyone, but I'll say everyone, is, we're so in love with medic and medpic, and we've got our list of questions and our checklist, and did we get this and identify this? Well, it's really it's the sort of the cure of curiosity, right? Is just do these things. We're training curiosity out of our sellers and saying that this is the way they should act, when really we want the opposite. And I wrote this last week on LinkedIn. I said, throw away your discovery questions, because we use discovery. I like to draw the analogy to, drilling for oil. It's extractive. We're extracting a natural resource out of something, but that's not going to help us. Is really, when you think about it, is, again, for certainly the deals the size that you talk about here, and certainly I've dealt on similar and larger deals as well, is my job wasn't to discover anything with the buyer. It was to help the buyer define what they wanted to achieve. And so I think as a seller, to the degree you think you're going to go in and you need to extract something from the buyer, you're really doing yourself a disservice. And really what you want to do is work with the buyer and say, well, yeah, what is important to you? Have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? We've worked with other companies. This is sort of what they are interested in. This is some of the results they got. Is that something that could be important to you? Is you're helping them think more deeply and broadly about, or perhaps even differently, about the challenges they have and what outcomes they think they can achieve. They're not discovering. We're working with them to help define the target. And if you do that, then you put yourself in the, sort of the pole position to ultimately win the deal. Because if you can define the terms of engagement, i.e. what the target is, then you increase your odds of winning.
Well, we are up on time again, man. I think this is another great conversation. I think
thanks for having me.
Some really good ideas that you put out there that are great reminders that we need to have right now. So, Andy, where can people find you? Where can they find more about what you're doing in your podcast?
Sure. Yeah, best place to connect with me is on LinkedIn. And listen to my podcast, the Win Rate Podcast, Apple, Spotify, wherever you listen to podcasts.
Well, Andy, thanks for being on the show, man. It was a pleasure having you back for round 2.
Thanks for having me.
And we look forward to seeing you on the next episode.
Sounds great. Talk to you soon.